Hey y'all, thanks for joining me in the next video on the That Old Panda. October is upon us. There's a lot of spooky things being played, a lot of spooky traditions, and scary things being done for the tradition of All Hallows Eve or Halloween that's coming up. And I've decided I'm going to cover some of the classic kind of games that brought me fright and some personal stories that, because it seems like, at least in the day and age of today, that a lot of folks are playing even these older games and they're definitely getting through it in the highest challenges, which is great. But it's missing the traditional scary factor that we came and known and loved for these. And I wanted to highlight those as well as give some well-needed context of how these games really moved and changed me. If you've seen me on Twitch and other things, I play a lot of variety spooky games, and I really love the Resident Evil and Silent Hill franchise, obviously. But I wanted to give my personal experience and all the personal fears that I felt that really changed me when it came to some of these older games. So, I give to you the story and the different types and parts of Resident Evil, of what makes it so scary, chilling, terrorizing to the bone as we go through some of the main parts of the game. But before we can do that, let's bring it back. Let's add some context and actually see where and when this came out, why it was so frightening. So the year is 1996. Resident Evil had just came out for the PlayStation 1. We didn't really have a lot when it came in regards to horror, but nothing that's as frightening and scary as zombies. In my story, I was a wee lad, pretty young, not a teenager in my teens, and at the time we did get a PlayStation 1 and we played like Bubsy 3D, but nothing super horrifying. Personally, I didn't even know about Resident Evil or the scariness that came with it until my father brought it home in the one little long box that we've seen for some of these older games. And the long box itself was just very interesting because it showed it looked like a very terrified or very accentuated man with a shotgun slash rifle and kind of what looked like a specialized military garb. And that's all we knew. When putting it into the PlayStation 1 console, my father played it and didn't show me and actually told me to go into the other room with his friends as they played through the intro and most of the game. And it wasn't until I decided to, that very night when we brought it home and everyone was asleep, that I decided to put the game into it. I was terrified. I have never seen any sort of live action like this that really kind of pushed me past the limit of being able to handle rated R movies. I never thought I'd ever control or be interactive in a horrific story of horror, terror, and even some pixelated gore of survival ever in my life. And this shaped me to the point where literally I had to turn off the game the first night, not telling anybody because I was afraid to get in trouble, in order to receive nightmares later on in the next night. It wasn't until 2 days after that I decided that in order for me to sleep correctly, because I had dealt with nightmares of the first 2 nights being that young, that I had to actually play, get really good with the game, and ultimately know at the ending. Because to me, in order for me to get over something like that, especially at that time when I was younger, I would have to see what the ending was going to be like. There was no internet, there was no YouTube, at least not really, and there was no way to really understand that. You had strategy guides, but even strategy guides most of the time were going to be spoiler free and wouldn't even tell you what those cinematics were. So at the time, in order to really get past this challenge of fear and anguish that I've been dealing with, I had to really sit down and play the game and finish it. And after playing it for pretty much the entire night into the morning, I finally did. So, with that context in mind, you had slasher films, you had very old horror films, none of the crazy gore stuff. I have not experienced any of that. 3D was just brand new. Not everybody had a computer to see some of these new 3D kind of games or media at the time. So this really was a pretty life-changing genre, a life-changing form of medium and interactive storytelling that really shaped my focus when it came to playing horror games. So this really did frighten me to the core when it came to going through this. So now, with that context in mind, let's go through the game and let's talk about the different parts of Resident Evil that frightened me and is the true terror for those for the first time. Intros. So the most horrifying first thing that I ran into when plays Resident Evil was the Capcom intro. Believe it or not, haunted me for any Capcom game going forward after playing Resident Evil. Showing Chris running down a hall with blood splattering also was very unsettling to me at the time. So this in and of itself, especially going to his eye, was not comforting.
Resident Evil.
This one part here, being able to select between Jill and Chris, it was actually a little bit comforting, showing the fact that you had two living human beings and selection for what you were going to do as far as the experience. Most of the time I picked Jill as it was the easier option with more. When selecting the character though, and the actual intros of the entire thing was kind of disturbing and a little unsettling. The music was very ominous. This also further proves the point that it is very scary with its intros, as it kind of gives off the impression
Alpha
that
Team
this
is flying
actually
around the
is
forest
happening.
zone situated in northwest Raccoon City. Reports of families being attacked by a group of about 10 people. Victims were apparently eaten.
Despite the intro being dumbed down in the PlayStation 1 version for the US, it still gave off the frightening visage of the black and white non-color scheme and just giving off that really creepy vibe. And again, this was 1996.
It was Bravo Team's helicopter.
A lot
Nobody was in it.
of the actual
But strangely, most of the
horror
equipment was still
elements
there.
of
However,
even
we
further
soon
pushing
discovered
the
why.
envelope of gore, creepiness, and such didn't exist back then. And it was something that resonated with me and caused many nightmares, especially when it came to the dogs and them chewing up body parts.
Hey! Joseph!
The uncensored version of this wouldn't really be known way later until the internet started becoming its prime. But yeah.
No! Don't go!
Even the, I guess, PG rated version of this was still unsettling, even though with the kind of the lower budget and kind of B-rated movie production still made it
Run for that
feel
house!
creepy and terrifying, especially for a boy in his teens. False sense of safety. There's a lot of that is in this game. One of the things I will point out is the fact that you do have actual folks that you talk to, work with, and play with in the game. However, like I mentioned before, it's a little bit fleeting because then you get the sense that you're actually in a team or a group with the game when technologically speaking it wasn't possible. It wasn't possible for them to develop a game where you could have a Barry walking around you and such. So you always ended up after these interactions.
What is this?
And cutscenes.
What is it?
To not
Blood.
really have them with you during
Jill,
gameplay.
see if you can find any other clues. I'll be examining this. Hope this is not Chris's blood.
This is one of the things that it is the part of the game that I've probably played the most is the intro and the interactions of the characters, because there's so much of it in the beginning. There's a little bit sprinkled throughout, and then a lot more towards the end. Nyctophobia, or scotophobia, sometimes even alluded to as aclophobia, is the fear of terror outside of sight, or fear of either lack of anything or just fear of overall of what you can't see. And this is common in this game, and it exhibits it very well. We're in a mansion with so many doors and so many levels, and none of us can really tell or see everything at once. So knowing that Wesker's out in the main lobby, not knowing what's happening to him, with Barry next door investigating the blood splatter that's in the kitchen, and then of course in this little cubbyhole where we first meet our first zombie, all of that in itself is very frightening and is something that kept me up at night when playing this game over and over again. A lot of times I would play this where I would actually, if I could leave, I would. Otherwise, I would have died several times against that zombie. This was a very wonderful scene.
Watch out! It's a monster!
Let me take care of this. Help me look for him, Jill. And don't leave this hall for the time being.
And the Wesker theme that's being played here actually exemplifies nyctophobia much more, knowing that there's so much going on in the out of sight and all these different rooms and doors, either with other zombies and other places, is just absolutely terrifying, especially for someone like myself, being young as I was playing this game when I really shouldn't have been.
Find anything, Jill?
Incredibly horrifying for someone such as myself, being in the teens and when I played this game. And then seeing human remains like this turn into absolutely nothing as you're playing something that's so active just adds to the terror of closed spaces. As you kind of travel through the mansion, there would be very sufferable and just very intoxicating and just suffocating areas in the mansion that just lead to in total uncomfortability. This is a very good example of that. As this particular zombie, even though he looks like he's dead, he's not. And you always end up getting bitten by him. But they do an excellent job, the developers and the designers, creative folks, of making sure that you're uncomfortable in different parts of the mansion. As wide and as vast as it is, these small areas are the worst and definitely make you feel uncomfortable going through them. Another good example of this also is the corridor where the dogs pop out. This, I cannot tell you. I know it's here after I've died a few times, and it still frightens me to this day. That sudden movement, crash, the dogs jumping through, and then the change in the actual music itself just leads to some crazy uncomfortability that I can never get over. The combination of these uncomfortable and suffocating portions that are so small with some of these incorrectly or crazily angled cameras definitely made it feel very uncomfortable for the player, as you would not, even though you're going through the mansion, you go through slowly step by step, you wouldn't be able to see ahead of you, with the one bathroom also included. Zombies. Even the more disturbing parts of Resident Evil itself was the introduction, especially when we seen the pure cutscene of the first individual being eaten and plopped around by a zombie. This in and of itself in '96 was definitely unique, as there was only a few actual mediums of movies that would showcase this. But knowing the fact that there are zombies looking to actually take you out and eat you and kill you, being a former set of humans themselves definitely led to a moment or two of uncomfortability and absolute terror. Sometimes it would take multiple bullets, and with those multiple bullets and weapons, which were uncommon in the game, as it did require you to have to actually survive and not shoot and kill every single one of them, definitely led to uncomfortability and terror as you're going through this massive mansion. More disturbing, I think, than some of the crows and other things, zombies definitely are the iconic icon for this game that definitely provides a moment of hesitation, scariness, fear, and actual showcasing of the undead afterlife. Imagery and lore. In Resident Evil, there's a long, comprehensive story about how the mansion was turned over. Having different areas of lore, though, showcasing kind of the remnants and historical references of these, with blood, splatter, gore, as well as even just areas of struggle and disturbance versus areas of desolation and no movement at all, makes it a very uncomfortable area to explore as well as to get over. The forest definitely being pecked to death, showcasing his exposed chest and different multitudes of problems, issues, and undead killing really further cements this point and just makes it entirely frightening as you proceed through the different parts of the laboratory, the mansion on the second floor, or even areas in the backyard, showcasing some of the wildlife that sprang from this unnatural chemical that was made, causing the Raccoon City incident. Including with the lore, one of the most unique and terrifying parts of Resident Evil is going to be the Keeper's Diary. This in and of itself is one of the things still highly talked about. In fact, there's even projects being made, short films, Resident Evil is a very good example, that showcase and highlight the actual even in the most current movies and reboots. Highlighting and going through the dialogue with the iconic two words at the end, itchy, tasty, is still being referenced today. Safe room. Despite this actually not being a fear, it does kind of level set the mood and give the ability for the player to kind of relax and take a moment to breathe as they're going through the intense triathlon and endurance of the game itself. With the wonderful theme that I think is most iconic and higher than any franchise in the world, the save theme itself brings you a form of comfort, at the same time knowing that outside of this, or past this particular theme, the terrors and everything else await you. So you take your time, you take a breath, and take a few moments to ensure that you yourself are ready to endure the rest of the horrors that the mansion has to offer. The snake. The snake in and of itself is incredible because of the fact of how massive and huge it is. But what's deeply disturbing is the close quarteredness and also the bloody handprint that's leading up to the stairs into a super dusty and neglected attic. Just adds to the frightness of it. Not to mention how massive the snake is. Now keep in mind in this time, a massive snake like this doesn't really exist in another form of game medium. With how corny and goofy it looks nowadays, back then, like the big T-Rex from Tomb Raider, this was a pretty incredible. This in and of itself always kind of stirred me and scared me and frightened me, knowing that this boss exists in the house, going through all the different creepy crawly walls, as well as making a second appearance before ultimately dying. The hunters, out of all the creatures that are the worst in this particular game, this is the one that causes me the most stress, scariness, irritation, and of course, with the hunter having the ability of being able to decapitate you with one swift move, unbeknownst to you until it actually happens to you, is why it is the most frightening and scariest thing to me versus the spiders, and let alone Neptune or even the tyrants that are in the end of this particular game.